Welcome, everyone. This week on our podcast, we have our host, of course, Mark Childers, and we have a new guest from the mental health field with 22 years of experience. Here she is, Jessica Sowers.
Hey, Jessica. How you doing today?
I'm good. How are you?
Good, doing great. Listen, before we get into our discussion, just tell us a little bit about yourself, what it is exactly that you do in the behavioral health field, and give us a little background.
Okay. Well, I do case management, family case management, in mental health, and I work with kids and families. And I'm also a parent coach, and I'm a yoga instructor as well.
Okay, cool.
So
Do you like work with kids in schools, or where do you get your clientele?
yeah, I work with kids in schools. I can go into the schools, and I do. I also go into the homes. If the family would like for me to. I meet clients in my office setting. So I meet people at parks, just whatever works for the individual and their families.
Okay, and so can you talk a little bit about what it is you actually do to help kids,
Yeah.
families?
So, yeah, I meet with the kids and their families, and we talk about what kind of issues the parents are seeing and would like to see change. I meet with the kids and talk to them about the same things depending on their age. If they're younger, they may not have as much input, but we just talk about what the family would like to see change, what the child would like to see change. We set goals and we work toward those goals.
Okay, great. So, so one of the reasons that I wanted to talk to you today is we got into a discussion about ego, James and I, and I think ego plays an important part especially in addiction and recovery. You work with children and families. I'm sure you see the effects of addiction, or even maybe some of the families you work with, you see addiction, active addiction possibly going on. But James says that you had a really good perspective on ego. And, that's what I want to talk to you about, because I can remember early on in my recovery, I would be sitting in a meeting, and I remember it like it was yesterday. This guy says, when I was out there using, I was an egomaniac with a low self-image. And when he said that, man, it just hit me like a ton of bricks. It's like, wow, that was exactly me when I was out there in active addiction. So I want to talk a little bit about ego, what it is. Is ego neutral? Do you think it's neutral? And so why it does actually become a problem, I think. Obviously, that was not a positive statement that guy made, but I related to it. So let's just talk about ego for a few minutes.
Okay.
So
great.
What's your definition of ego?
Well, I see ego as anytime like you're comparing yourself to someone else, or you get defensive, you get angry, you get upset. That's all ego. When you identify with your personality or your car or your job, or you see that as who you are, that's the ego. And it's interesting because I always thought the ego was like a super inflated thing, like you thought you were better than other people, or you thought you were really amazing. But in fact, ego is the opposite as well. So you can have when you feel inferior to others, that is also an ego state.
Right. So ego, is ego like money? It's neither good nor bad. It's how you use it, or
I think so. I mean, I think it's probably not such a good thing when you can't get out of the ego state, or you don't recognize the ego state. So I don't know. I don't like to really define things as good or bad.
Okay.
I think our egos are necessary part of the evolutionary process that human beings go through. So yeah, I think it's necessary in that way to go through it to get on the other side of the spirit world and the being part of the human, like human beings. Like you've probably heard the quote, "We're spiritual beings stuck in a human body."
Right. Well, and I believe that. I believe
do too.
we're spiritual and we're physical.
Yes.
So because, when I say I was an egomaniac, my self-worth, I think what I did was I tried to overcompensate for who I really felt like on the inside. And I felt really like a failure. I knew what I was doing. When I was in my addiction, I knew I wasn't doing the right thing. I was selfish, basically. That's what an egomaniac is, a selfish person. And I definitely can look back because, all my money, every day I got up, the first thing I thought about was, when I was in my addiction. Now, this wasn't every day my whole life up until the time I went through recovery, but there were times when I was addicted to substances that's all I thought about. It almost became like my God, and I neglected my family. I neglected my work. I was able to function somewhat with work, but that ended up crashing down too. So we could say that there is healthy egos, you think?
I've been listening to this spiritual teacher by the name of Eckhart Tolle.
Okay.
And I don't know that I'm able to answer that question. I want to say yes, because I believe they're in balance and you need the ego and you just need it to be in a healthy balance. But I'm not sure that I believe that. I don't know that I believe the ego is healthy.
Okay.
So, yeah, I'll have to investigate on that and get back to you.
Well, I'm reminded of a Bible passage where it says the flesh wars against the spirit. And I think there's a lot, well, I know there's a lot of truth to that, but I think that might come into play in what we're talking about. You mentioned the spiritual being as opposed to the physical. We're both spiritual and physical, but maybe when we're in a healthy spiritual state, our ego diminishes.
Yes.
It's still there.
I believe that, yes.
But it's not the main thing,
Mm-hmm.
right? It's not the car I drive. It's not the house I live in. It's more of, being a good person and who can I help and
Yes.
what can I do to contribute to make this world a better place. That's more spiritual.
Yes. And it's a place of non-judgment. And I think it's a really, really hard place to get to, but I think that's what it is when you're a place where you can just look at a situation or at a person and have completely no judgment whatsoever. It's not good, it's not bad, it just is. I think that's a place where you're kind of out of the ego state into the being state and the consciousness.
And that's a hard place to get to. And it's a hard place to stay in. Because our ego's constantly competing with
Absolutely.
that.
I think we do go in and out of consciousness and ego states.
Yeah.
I catch myself doing it, and I feel like the more we can catch ourselves doing it, the less the ego is there.
Right.
Yeah, it kind of diminishes.
Yes. James.
Yeah, something that kind of struck me in there was this, the connection between, or a balance between, the spiritual and the physical. In my life, at least, and I would imagine this is probably in a ton of people's lives, the spiritual part of me is constantly forcing a change in the physical part of me and the mental part of me, which is not comfortable. So I would imagine, keeping that balance of, physical and mental and the spiritual is really difficult, because it is constantly requiring me to better myself and change. Do you know what I mean?
Yes. And
Yeah.
change, we
Yeah.
talked about that last week.
Yeah, change is so hard.
It's not comfortable.
No,
No.
it's not fun at all. It's
And it's the only thing
It's
that is
tough.
constant that we know for sure is going to happen is change. So it's like learning how to get comfortable with the uncomfortable is the key.
yeah.
And Buddhism talks about that a lot. And it's a practice.
Mhm. Well, as I said, I think the ego and the spirit is constantly competing against one another, and it's you have to be vigilant, and so let's talk about looking at people totally non-judgmental. Now, I'm a guy that, I was a little radical growing up. I used to dye my hair different colors before any of this blue and green and this chartreuse or whatever color that is. I don't even know how to say, but like one time I put black spots in my hair. This is like in the 80s, and people looked at me like I'm crazy, or I played in a band and I had 4 earrings in one ear. Ooh, how radical was that? But I thought, well, I'm a musician, so I can get away with it. But then I found myself looking at other people with, tattoos, piercings, that wasn't so popular when I was a kid, but it's getting more popular. Gauges in the ear, whatever it is, and not being judged. I would look at them and like, oh, what's the matter with you? Or why'd you get that bad tattoo? I found myself to be a very judgmental person, especially before I went through treatment for my addiction. And one of the things, I think one of the turning point, one of the spiritual experiences that I had was living at the Salvation Army for a week before I could get into a detox place, because my wife didn't necessarily want me around at the time. And so living at the Salvation Army taught me, and I've been going to church all my life, and I believe in God. And I know that Jesus said, we're not to be judgmental, but it wasn't until I had that experience where I was eating breakfast, lunch, and dinner with people that lived under the bridge down the road. At every mealtime, they would come up from under the bridge and come, and we'd all eat together. And I don't know, something happened to me that week. People are like, "Oh man, you had to stay at Salvation Army? Oh, that's terrible." No, it was probably one of the best experiences of my life, because I'm like, I am no different than the person here that lives under the bridge. The only difference is the outside. We're all spiritual beings, and we're all the same, really. You take away this outside body, we're all the same. So nobody's better than anyone. No one's worse than anyone. And so that's been a real struggle for me. And since then, it's been better.
Mm-hmm.
But and I work with people in recovery. I go to the jails. That helps keep me grounded. But so how do you get to a state? That's how I did it. But how do you get to a state where you look at everybody the same and you don't judge them based on their circumstances or their income or how they're dressed?
I think the only way to be in a state like that is to be in a good state in yourself.
Okay.
In a being state yourself. I think you have to be in an egoless state to be able to really not judge other people. And how you get to that is a lot of practice.
Right.
I don't feel like I'm there yet. I feel like I am a place where I can catch myself judging other people. And then I say to myself, okay, what is it about me? Because I'm really judging myself.
Mm-hmm.
When I'm looking at someone else and noticing a flaw in them,
Mm-hmm.
it's really something about myself that is there, but it's easier for me to notice in that other person. It's like a reflection. It's like a mirror.
Okay.
So I've come to that point, and then I'm like, oh, okay, well, what is it about myself that I'm judging right now, or that I'm not comfortable with, or I'm out of balance with, so that then I can work on that. And so that's where I'm to that place, but I am not to a place where I can completely be non-judgmental. So,
Right. And I'm not perfect at it either.
Yeah.
But I'm like you. I mean, as sometimes we do, we notice maybe these little imperfections that people have, and that is ego. You know, that's and maybe focusing. I've heard this. Well, when you focus on other people, then you're not focusing on you, and you can pick out their flaws. But we're really good at picking out other people's flaws, I think, as human beings.
Yes.
But
yes, we are.
But we're sometimes we're afraid to look at ourselves and see where we need to make improvements.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I would almost say that because other people are the best mirror, you know, like our kids are the best mirror, they say all the time. I think everyone, you know, all the other people that we see are the best mirror, and all we are, you know, just judging ourselves by that mirror, which is what they're doing, you know, and we see what they're doing, which is usually something we don't like that we do. And then we're like, oh, I can't believe they're doing that. And we do the exact same thing. Or even like we said the last episode, that, you know, we do it, you know, 10 minutes later, 15 minutes later, or whatever, right after we judge someone.
Right. Like the driving.
Yeah.
Like,
yeah.
I would tailgate people because they weren't driving the way I thought they should, or they're going too slow, or they turned the wrong way. I saw there was a lady today, downtown Parkersburg, coming down a one-way street right at me. And I've seen that happen twice now in like 3 days downtown. And, 10 years ago, I would have like blown the horn at her and, hey, what are you doing? Or like when I would be driving with my kids, I'd get on their bumper, and my kids would tell me, Dad, just back off a little bit. And then like the next day or later that day, I would pull out in front of somebody and do something stupid. And it was a reminder that, hey, buddy, you're not perfect driver either, but that's one of the things I had to work on. So you're into yoga. So let's talk about that a little bit. So is it the mind-body thing? Is it the mind? What is it about yoga that you like?
Well, I think science is starting to prove practices that were done 3,000 years ago to be very valid and help people in recovery of all different kinds: mental health, addiction, behavioral health. I think people think of yoga as like the postures, you know, the weird positions you put your body in. That's part of yoga. And that's what most people think of it as, but that's just a small part. Yoga is definitely mind, body, spirit, you know, the whole connection, and that, you know, they're all affected by each other. We're just starting to, I think in our culture, in the Western culture, we rely on science to prove things. And I think back then it was experiential. They did it and it helped, so they believed in it. And now we kind of, rely on science. We need facts. We need to know it works before we try it.
Right.
Instead of just trying to experience it for ourselves. But I think the breathing practices in yoga really calm the nervous system and put it, in a calmer state. So that's part of yoga, is the breathing, and also the mental, just trying to realize that you can control your thoughts, and that every thought you have, you don't have to run with it. So it's kind of yoga. There's a lot of psychology in yoga. But yeah, I think we're just realizing that these practices actually work. And yoga, the postures that you see people do, that most people think of yoga, those were actually done to prepare the body and mind for meditation, to, try to focus the mind and calm it down as well as the body. So you would do these postures and get all, move around and get, all the jiggles and wiggles out. Right. And then you would calm, sit, and do your meditation. So that is actually just, in preparation for the meditation part of. So yoga encompasses a lot of things. And yeah, it's really helped me. And it's been a lot of the philosophy of the yoga that's really helped me. I mean, the postures have helped my physical body.
Right.
I've had a, back. I was a gymnast growing up as a kid, and I think I probably had a lot of injuries that I didn't know about. So I was first introduced to yoga. Well, a doctor encouraged me to try yoga and Pilates when I went to him and said, look, I have back pain and I'm not willing to take pills anymore. I don't want to be given pills. I just want something natural. And he said, try yoga. So that's when I actually started yoga, was for physical pain. And it did in fact help. And then years went by and I really started delving into yoga and finding out the mental aspect and the psychological aspect behind it. And that's what has really helped me.
So you talk about controlling your thoughts. I mean, who doesn't want to do that, right?
Exactly.
Well, hopefully. Well, I'm sure there's people out there who don't. But and so you're talking about some things here. Like, I don't do yoga, but I do exercise. And it is a physical thing, but I'm telling you, when I get done, I feel so much better mentally. It's chronic pain self-management, teaching people to manage their pain other than taking narcotics, so we're supposed to take this and teach people that there's other options to back pain or arthritis than just taking some narcotic pills, or even ibuprofen, which is trash for your liver. I mean, but 5 or 6 years ago, before this opiate epidemic hit, you could go to a doctor and say, here's 30 Vicodin or 10 or 20, whatever, or
been there, done that.
Yeah, me too.
Absolutely, and, lots of times.
Yeah, and that was the first option. Now what they're saying is that, okay, there's yoga, there's stretching, there's physical therapy, there's chiropractors, there's a massage therapist. There's like 5 or 6 things you can do. Yoga,
acupuncture.
Yeah, I mean, 5 or 6 things you can do before you even entertain the thought of taking a pill for your pain. And that's what they're trying to teach in the hospitals now, and the doctors. This lady that is associated with this, her job is to educate physicians on how to treat people's pain, instead of just, here's your script, see you in 30 days. And I just think that's awesome. The problem with that is everybody wants a pill to take care. Let's just
instant gratification.
Yes.
Yeah.
Instead of taking the time to seek someone out.
And I did want to clarify one thing.
Yes.
We said, I said, I want to be careful about how I say things. And I said earlier, control your thoughts. I want to just clarify. It's not even so much about controlling your thoughts. It's about having an awareness of what your thoughts are, and then deciding which thoughts you want to actually go with.
Right.
As compared to, because sometimes we have thoughts and, we're not controlling what those are, but we control what we do with those thoughts.
Right. I got you. Yeah, I understand. And we've talked before about, there's a tape rolling in our head all the time, where thoughts are coming in, leaving, coming in. The problem with a lot of people is it's a lot of negative, so it's thoughts that you're no good, you'll never amount to anything. Could be thoughts about something that someone has said to you, someone that's supposedly supposed to care about you and says, and so those things tend to roll around. But I'm a firm believer in you can manage, like you say, manage that better. And there's different ways to do it. I'm sure yoga is part of it, meditation, where you can have a little more of control, if you want to use that word, on what you think about, getting rid of negative thoughts. But putting good stuff in too is a big part of that, I think, because I've heard garbage in, garbage out, right? But I think the opposite is true. Good stuff in, good stuff out,
Absolutely.
So,
yes.
Protect your environment. Nobody else can protect my environment better than I can.
Thoughts become things. Negative thoughts, positive
Sure.
thoughts.
And so, yeah.
Positive in, positive out, like you were saying.
Right. And so protecting our environment. We can do a lot better job of that than I think we give ourselves credit for sometimes. The people we hang with, that's a big one with people in recovery.
Mhm.
A person can go 2-5 years without using, hook up with some old friends, let their guard down, and they can relapse that easy by being around the wrong people. People, places, and things. Protect your environment, not just people that are in recovery, but everyone. I tell my kids, 1 Corinthians 15:33, be not deceived. Evil companions corrupt good morals, so be careful who you hang with. So anyway, well, this ego thing is fascinating to me because I haven't really put a whole lot of thought into it. Like I said, that one statement that the gentleman made when I was in recovery, or when I was in a meeting early in recovery, it just kind of struck me. But I've always been fascinated with how the brain works and our self-esteem, because I had low self-esteem growing up. I mean, I was 45 years old before I got a handle on that, hey, I'm just as good as the next guy and I'm no better than anybody.
Yeah.
But today I still struggle with ego. I still struggle with that.
Yeah, me too.
Um,
I'm 48.
yeah. So.
Yeah, I think what's really good is we're starting to teach kids in schools. Like I go into schools and we're starting to teach kids social emotional skills, and we're starting to talk about our thoughts and our feelings.
That's
and
awesome.
We're teaching it a lot younger than you and I learned.
We didn't learn. I didn't learn.
I didn't learn it at all, except on my own, just searching.
Right.
So I think that, things are evolving in a positive direction. I have a lot of hope and faith in humanity, and that, us teaching kids this earlier on, that they hopefully can deal with these different emotional states and the thoughts. And I know that's what I do with kids when I work with kids.
And that's awesome. I'm glad you brought that up, because we need to get in and start teaching kids earlier about emotions. And because what they taught us, well, I don't know if they taught us this is what I took away from whatever was going on when I was a kid, was you don't talk about that stuff. Just stuff it and just suck it up, buttercup, and just do it. And that's great for some personalities. If you're a resilient person, I wasn't. I was a people pleaser, but I'm glad we're talking about emotional intelligence with kids. So anyway, I got real talkative there. Anything else you want to add?
Any questions you have, James? Or comments?
No, I think I've said everything I needed to say.
Yeah. I can't think of anything. I love the ego. I love learning about the ego, studying about it, and I would recommend anyone that is interested to check out Eckhart Tolle. I listen to his podcast on Spotify. Him and Oprah. I don't even know the name of it. Essential Teachings of Eckhart Tolle. And he wrote a book, The Power of Now. I believe or The New Earth. He wrote 2 books, and they go through some of the chapters in that book. I forget which one it is. I think it's The New Earth. And they go through the chapters and describe the ego and explain it. And literally, that's how I've learned everything I know about the ego in depth. I touched on it in psychology classes in Akron in the 90s. And boy, we know so much more about everything now, about, personality, psychology, neuroplasticity of the brain, and how we can change that. And I've
been studying neuroplasticity.
Beautiful.
It is awesome.
Fascinating. Yes.
Yeah. I just listened to a podcast this morning on that. So,
yeah.
Oh, we got so much more to talk about down the road.
For sure.
Right. Cool. Well, thanks for being here. I appreciate it. Yes. Eckhart Tolle, right?
Yes.
All right.
Check him out.
Spiritual teacher.
Check him out. Thank you.